Welcome to Larry the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. And another one of my heavy thoughts video. This is where I take a moment to share with you what I've been thinking about lately. And this just came to me. I just literally finished making a video, and I'm not sure if it'll be posted already, but on a 10-song Judas Priest album. Somebody came to me and said, you can make a vinyl record for you, 10 songs, Judas Priest, what would you pick? And I mentioned it in the video, and it got me thinking and made me want to just do a quick heavy thoughts on it, that during the age of vinyl, there was, you really sort of thought of the album in two parts. At least I did, side one and side two. And there was some consideration that bands thought about when it came to how are you going to open side one? That's obviously what people are going to start with. But how are you going to open side two? How are you going to close side one? How are you going to close side two? And maybe this is, I'm going to say this. I'm going to make a video at some point in the future and about great side two album openers, or great, I'm sure I think I might have done something on album closers. Maybe like side one album closers and side two openers. But this is something that I think got lost in the CD age, because obviously you have no side one or side two. I mean, cassettes, you had the same thing. So even if you were somebody who grew up on cassettes, pretty much like I did, I used to sort of think of albums by side one and side two, because you had to, just like on a vinyl record or a cassette, you had to get up and you had to flip it over. I think there were cassette players that used to just automatically flip over. Did they? I think I remember having one of those. I don't remember. Let me know in the comments if you had a cassette player that was able to do that. So in your head, you really sort of organized things around side one and side two. I'll tell you a funny story, that my first copy of Black Sabbath's first album, and this is so strange, the sides were flipped around. Side two was side one, and I think I had already heard the album, so I had borrowed it from a friend, so I sort of knew what was going on with it. But it's kind of weird, it messed with my mind a little bit, because there's an example. It's so important, man. The song Black Sabbath opening side one, that's a hugely important album opener. And back then with vinyl records, there was serious thought put into, for most bands at least, the song order and how you were going to lay things out, because there was also a time consideration. I think I've talked about this in other videos, that once you sort of went over 20 minutes on a side, you were running the risk of sacrificing sound quality, because you can only cram in so many grooves on a record. And once you get past that 20-minute mark, in order to squeeze those in, you're starting to cut into the fidelity of the record, especially when you get to the songs towards the end of the record, because the groove starts getting narrower and narrower as you get towards the label. This, of course, something cassettes and CDs never had to worry about, but it is something that is missed a little bit, I think. And when I go back and think of these old records, and as I've been making these 10-song albums, what I think has been fun about it is thinking about, okay, what am I going to open side one with? What am I going to open side two with? Darren and I, we did one for Black Sabbath on a Sabbath Sunday, and we talked about that, how, we really thought about the album closers and everything. And in the CD age, you didn't quite get that. And I think, to go off on another slight tangent, I think because CDs had so much, you could fit, I think 79 minutes or 80 minutes of music onto a CD. There was that period there where people felt compelled, like, oh, we got to fill this up, all this extra time. We can put all this extra music on it. But more times than not, it usually feels like, I always feel like there's too much on a lot of that they put on CDs, that they should have thought more like vinyl. That 40 minutes, again, maybe it's because I grew up on cassettes and vinyl. 40 minutes always seems like the perfect amount of music. And when you start getting into 50 minutes, 60, unless it's a double album, okay, but when you're talking about a single CD, 50, 60, 70 minutes of music, it's usually just too much. And it makes me again, maybe because I grew up on it, that 40-minute mark, roughly 40 minutes, give or take 5 minutes either in either direction, seems like the perfect amount where it leaves you kind of wanting more. In the vinyl, the limitations of the format, it forced the artists to think more like, okay, we really got to pick our 40 minutes, best 40 minutes of music here. Usually it came out to 8 to 10 songs. We really got to pick our best stuff here because they couldn't put in more without turning it into a double album. So I think that sort of the limitations of the format also forced out the best songs from the artists and forced them to really think about the flow of the record. Because also, I mentioned that if you had more than 20 minutes of music, you were losing some sound quality as you got to the end of the side. But even just in general, for a 20 minute aside record, usually the song at the beginning of the album sounded a little bit better than the song at the end of the album, because at the beginning of the record, the grooves are wider and longer, and as the record goes in, they start to get more compressed, and you get sort of this what they call inner groove distortion, where the needle starts getting pulled towards the center of the record, and there's things to counteract that, and that's what the anti-skate is for on an album. And if you have a really nice setup and everything, you can negate this sort of inner groove distortion. But it's something, and it exists, and it's a limitation of the format that caused artists to have to sort of think about how they were going to sequence the record, which kind of got lost a little bit in the CD age, and it's certainly completely lost in the streaming age, where people just skip around and people don't seem to have the patience. At least feels like the younger generation doesn't have the patience to sit through a whole record the way that we did. Streaming is sort of designed for you to just have playlists and one song at a time and quickly skipping over things. It's so easy to do that. When you had records and cassettes, you had to lift up the needle, drop it again. A cassette, you had to fast forward. If you didn't like the song, you had to fast forward and try to find where the next song began. And a lot of times it just wasn't worth the aggravation. So you sat through it, and there were a lot of songs that you grew to love because you had to sit through it on the album, and a lot of albums lose their meaning and flow a little bit if you're just sort of cherry picking songs out of the album. They're meant to flow a certain way, and I think you can all agree that there's certain albums that you can hear it in your head. You can hear the next song coming up. So all right, there you go. Just heavy thoughts. I guess it didn't turn out as quick as I thought it was going to be. It just came to me about the old vinyl format and having to lay out songs for vinyl and cassettes. What do you guys think? Do you just sort of miss that? Do you still think side one and side two in your head when you're listening to a lot of these classic albums? Just let me know what you think about the whole thing down in the comments down below. Till we see you again, make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.